The 54th Massachusetts Regiment was the first North military regiment made of black soldiers during the Civil War. From the beginning of the Civil War, President Lincoln argued that the Union forces were not fighting to end slavery but to prevent the disintegration of the United States. For the abolitionists, however, ending slavery was the reason for the war, and they argued that black people should be able to join the fight for their freedom. However, African Americans were not allowed to serve as soldiers in the Union Army. In January 1863, Secretary of War Stanton finally gave John A. Andrew, the abolitionist governor of Massachusetts, authorization to form regiments that could include persons of African descent. The governor had long been an advocate of raising black regiments from the free black population. Like most abolitionists, he felt the surest path to citizenship for black Americans was for them to be allowed to fight and die for their freedom in their country. When the Emancipation Proclamation came out, it stated that such persons, that is African American men of suitable condition, will be received into the armed services of the United States. The formation of the regiment was a matter of controversy and public attention from its inception. Questions were raised as to the black man's ability to fight in the white man's war. Although Massachusetts Governor John Andrew believed that black men were capable of leadership, others felt that commissioning blacks as officers was simply too controversial. Therefore, they decided that the commissioned officers were to be white and the enlisted men black. Any black officers up to the rank of lieutenant were non-commissioned and reached their positions by moving up through the ranks. To lead the 54th Massachusetts, Governor Andrew chose a young white officer named Robert Gould Shaw. Shaw's parents were wealthy and prominent abolitionist activists. Shaw himself dropped out of Harvard to join the Union Army. The most famous enlistees were Charles and Louis Douglas, two of the abolitionist Frederick Douglass' sons, who viewed military service as a step towards freedom. By the middle of February 1863, recruiting for the 54th Massachusetts Regiment was underway. Newspaper advertisements and recruiting posters encouraged black men to enlist. 25 men responded promptly, and by the end of the first week of enlistments, 72 recruits were present at Camp Meigs in Redville, Massachusetts. However, more soldiers were needed, and recruiters turned their attention to states throughout the North and South and into Canada to locate enough eligible black men to fill the regiment. By 14 May 1863, the regiment was comprised of 1,000 enlisted men and a full complement of white officers. Colonel Shaw and his troops landed at Hilton Head on June 3rd. The next week, they were forced by Shaw's superiors to participate in a particularly destructive raid on the town of Darien, Georgia. The colonel was furious. His troops had come south to fight for freedom and justice, he argued, not to destroy and defend the towns with no military significance. He wrote to General George Strong and asked if the 54th might lead the next Union charge on the battlefield. Even as they fought to end slavery in the Confederacy, the African American soldiers of the 54th were fighting against another injustice as well. The U.S. Army paid black soldiers $10 a week, and white soldiers got $3 more. To protest against the insult, the entire regiment, Soldiers and officers alike refused to accept their wages until black and white soldiers earned equal pay for equal work. This did not happen until the war was almost over. On July 18, 1863, the 54th prepared to storm Fort Wagner, which guarded the port of Charleston. At dusk, Shaw gathered 600 of his men on a narrow strip of sand just outside Wagner's fortified walls and readied them for action. "I want you to prove yourselves," he said. "The eyes of thousands will look on what you do tonight." As night fell, Shaw led his men over the walls of the fort. Unfortunately, the Union generals had miscalculated. 1,700 Confederate soldiers waited inside the fort, ready to battle. The men of the 54th were outgunned and outnumbered. 281 of the 600 charging soldiers were killed, wounded, or captured. Shaw himself was shot in the chest on his way over the wall and died instantly. To show their contempt for the soldiers of the 54th, the Confederates dumped all of their bodies in a single unmarked trench and cabled Union leaders that "we have buried Shaw with his niggers." The Southerners expected that this would be such an insult that white officers would no longer be willing to fight with black troops. In fact, the opposite was true. Shaw's parents replied that there could be no holier place to be buried than surrounded by brave and devoted soldiers. The 54th lost the battle at Fort Wagner, but they did a great deal of damage there. Confederate troops abandoned the fort soon afterwards. For the next 2 years, the regiment participated in a series of successful siege operations in South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. The 54th Massachusetts returned to Boston in September 1865.